The Iran War finally happened, and the first casualty was the truth. The battle wasn't just limited to the skies over Israel and Iran. It raged in the digital trenches as well, an information war of propaganda that warped reality and caused confusion. So who won? Who lost? Well, in this two-part video series, I'm taking you behind the curtain, because everything presented on the grand stage was a lie. Understanding what really happened is crucial, because the current ceasefire is only a temporary pause as both sides regroup, rearm, and brace for a larger showdown. So buckle up, because I'm taking you from the nuclear negotiations to the first strike to the ceasefire and showing you what might happen next.
We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Months ago, I demonstrated to you all how the negotiations over Iran's nuclear program was merely a ruse in the lead up to a war that was inevitable. It was obvious to me and many others because of how Steve Witkoff, Trump's Middle East envoy, who is a pro-Israel Zionist Jew, handled himself during the negotiations. Firstly, Witkoff is very close with the Mossad. Check out this interview with The Atlantic. He wanted to show me a pager given to him by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and senior officials of the Mossad. The pager commemorates the intricate operation in which Israel detonated handheld devices used by Hezbollah. Witkoff located the gadget amid a tangle of electronics he uses to communicate abroad in his role as America's shadow Secretary of State. The back of the pager, he proudly told me, carries an inscription: "Dear Steve, friend of the State of Israel," and then the acronym OTJ for One Tough Jew. Now, I don't know about you, but I think it's hard to imagine how a biased pro-Israel Zionist Jew who carries a Mossad pager could be an objective, honest broker for an important deal like this on behalf of the United States. Secondly, Witkoff was taking meetings with the Mossad before and after every meeting with Iran during the negotiations. Now, why would an American be meeting with a foreign secret intelligence service at all? A bit strange, don't you think? Thirdly, and this is where it becomes even more obvious that the negotiations were a ruse, Witkoff would constantly move the goalposts every time Iran agreed to something. At first, the focus was on Iran enriching uranium to 60%. Long story short, 90% or more is needed for a nuclear weapon. So Witkoff asked Iran to return to the 3.5% enrichment threshold established by the previous JCPOA nuclear agreement with Obama. Iran agreed. But then Witkoff moved the goalposts and suggested that he actually wanted Iran to have zero enrichment. Now, Iran spent decades advancing their ability to enrich their own uranium with sophisticated centrifuges. So why would they want to agree to that? But then the goalposts moved again. Witkoff started asking Iran to get rid of their facilities altogether. Now, if you think that's a bad offer, wait, because there's more. Witkoff then asked Iran to get rid of their ballistic missiles program.
An existential threat to Israel, as does an Iran with a large amount of missiles. That is as big an existential threat as the nuclear threat. We must stand resolute and united against this danger, no matter what the cost.
The ballistic missiles are virtually Iran's only deterrent, as they don't have an advanced air force or nuclear weapons. The model for the deal that Benjamin Netanyahu asked Witkoff to implement was the so-called Libya model. Long story short, Libya announced it was voluntarily abandoning its nuclear weapons program on December 19, 2003. This decision was part of a larger rollback of Libya's weapons program, including chemical and biological weapons and long-range ballistic missiles. Well, we all know what happened to Libya and Gaddafi. In 2011, NATO militarily intervened in Libya by bombing the country and funding armed al-Qaeda proxies to overthrow Gaddafi. 6 months later, Gaddafi was sodomized to death on camera. As Hillary Clinton later put it, "We came, we saw, he died."
We came, we saw, he died.
14 years later, and Libya is still carved into pieces as the civil war rages on. Seeing the destruction of Libya, Syria, and Iraq, you can imagine that Iran wasn't really excited about this Libya model. So Witkoff was essentially asking Iran to destroy itself in the long term or go to war. It was an offer Iran could never accept, which is why I and many others were telling you that the negotiations were fake and that the war was inevitable. The negotiations were designed to fail from the very beginning. It was all just a ruse to buy time and make preparations for war. This was proven correct when Trump himself admitted that he was playing along with the Israelis to lull the Iranians to sleep in order to develop an element of surprise. Trump told the New York Post, "I always knew the date for the Israel attack on Iran." And now the Washington Post reports that the Israeli-US attack on Iran was decided months earlier and had nothing to do with nuclear weapons. Senior Israeli officials say they already decided by March to attack Iran, the same month that the US intelligence community assessed that Iran had no nuclear weapons program.
The IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003.
And the Times of Israel reported that the attack on Iran was drilled more than a year ago during the Biden administration. So there you have it. The war was inevitable. This was planned long ago, and it was never about Iran's nuclear program. It was about destroying Iran as a state on behalf of Israel. With this context established, let's now discuss the surprise attack by Israel that started the war on June 13th. In the lead up to the attack, Mossad agents contacted IRGC generals and threatened to murder them, their wives, and their children if they did not film a video of themselves renouncing the government and abandoning it. Their plan was to use these videos as propaganda and release them after the Blitzkrieg offensive to cause chaos and confusion, leading to a collapse of Iran. However, not a single IRGC general agreed to this offer. Hours later, Israel attacked Iran. In the initial hours, Israel had assassinated dozens of IRGC generals and nuclear scientists. Mossad agents inside the country, a mix of Iranians, Kurds, Afghans, and others, carried out operations that included the use of pre-positioned Stinger missiles, car bombs, and drones. These operatives identified Iranian air defense launchers and radars and then attacked them with either missiles or drones. These attacks suppressed Iran's air defenses west of Tehran so that Israeli fighter jets and Hermes drones could operate over their airspace to carry out precision strikes on IRGC generals, nuclear scientists, and air defense targets. Israel also carried out attacks on Iran's missile launchers in order to suppress their ability to retaliate. The chaos, confusion, and destruction was palpable. For hours, Iran was in a state of shock and confusion. Dozens of IRGC generals had been killed. There were fears that the supreme leader, the Ayatollah, would also be assassinated. It was clear that Israel was attempting to decapitate leadership and produce a collapse. Israel called this war operation Rising Lion.
Tonight I wish to speak to you, the proud people of Iran. We're in the midst of one of the greatest military operations in history, Operation Rising Lion. The Islamic regime, which has oppressed you for nearly 50 years, threatens to destroy my country, the state of Israel. We're also clearing the path for you to achieve your objective, which is freedom.
So this operation was actually code for regime change in Iran. In fact, the son of the deposed Shah, Reza Pahlavi, who works closely with Israel and the West, took to social media calling for uprisings.
همیهنانم جمهوری اسلامی به پایان خود رسیده و در حال سقوط است. تنها یک خیزش همگانی لازم است تا این کابوس برای همیشه پایان یابد. اکنون زمان ایستادن است. زمان بازپسگیری ایران.
Israel's hope was that the Iranian people who were unhappy with the government for various reasons, ranging from domestic issues and the pressure of crippling sanctions on the country, would turn against the government and overthrow it. But this didn't happen. To Israel's surprise, Iranian leadership didn't buckle. The surviving generals didn't betray the government, and the people didn't come out for an uprising. In fact, Iranian youth, even those who severely disliked the government, took to the streets to condemn Israel for the attack on their country.
خیلی عصبانیم. واقعا از حریم خودشون پاشنه دارن بیشتر دراز میکنن، به خاکمون داره تجاوز میشه. اگر عصبانی نباشم و اعتراضمو نشون بدم باید چیکار کنم؟ باید اینجا باشم، حضورم مهمه.
آمریکا طرفداری ملت ایران رو میکرد، زیاده‌گویی میکرد که من با مردم ایران خوبم، در صورتی که به مردم، به ملت، به دولت شبیخون زد.
آمریکا عوض نمیشه.
من تا آخرین قطره خون خودم و هموطنام دوست دارم وایسم، ایستادگی کنم و انتقام این کاری که در حق ایران کرد و ازش بگیرم.
Fuck you نتانیاهو. Fuck you. Fuck you اسرائیل. Fuck you.
In one attack, Israel bombed an Iranian media facility. During a presentation, an Iranian anchorwoman was forced to take cover. A few minutes later, however, she returned to work and became a symbol of defiance for the country. Take a look at this video of an Iranian woman celebrating her defiance.
حتما هممون این خانم رو دیدیم وقتی که صدا و سیما رو زدن که تا آخرین لحظه ایستادن و دارن به وظیفه‌شون عمل میکنن، حتی وقتی که همون استودیو رو زدن. اصلا مهم نیست عضو چه حزبی هستین، چپ راست بالا پایین، حتی چه دین و مذهبی دارید، چه ایشونی که با حجابن، چه منی که نیستم. الان بیشتر از هر چیزی احتیاج داریم که متحد باشیم و پشت هم باشیم به خاطر ایرانمون.
So the plan had completely backfired and produced a rally around the flag effect. What Israel and its Western backers underestimated was the patriotism most Iranians feel regardless of their dislike for the current government. For example, in the lead up to the war, Trump insulted the Iranian people by ordering corporations like Google to change the name of the Persian Gulf to the Arab Gulf. This wasn't an attack on the Ayatollah or the Islamic Republic. It was an attack on Persian history and civilization, which alienated those who hate the Iranian government but still love their country and are very proud of it. The fact that Israel also murdered hundreds of civilians in their attack, including little children, poured fuel onto the fire. So instead of producing regime change on a fragile government, Israel actually strengthened it. And after some time, the Ayatollah promoted new leadership from the ranks to take command of the response to Israel. Soon, Iran would respond and fire hundreds of missiles at Israel, pounding oil facilities in Haifa and power plants all across the country. Iran began pummeling Israel hard. For the next 12 days, both sides would trade aerial attacks on each other. Now, with this context established, we need to explore what happened militarily and address the propaganda from both sides, because there were a number of claims made with the intent to alter the perception of the conflict. So let's start with Israel's claims. Israel claimed the following: that they had air superiority over Iran's airspace, that they had destroyed the majority of Iran's missile launchers, and that Iranian missiles were inaccurate and only targeting civilians. Let's start with claims of air superiority. Did Israel truly knock out Iran's air defenses and fly over their airspace at will? Sort of, but not really. It's complicated. To understand why, we need to explore how Israel was carrying out their attacks, because it's actually very impressive and confusing. While Israel's fighter jets are incredibly powerful, Iran has an advantage that Israel's neighbors don't: distance. The shortest distance between Israel and Iran is 620 miles. This produces severe limitations on how Israel can use its air force, which is its most powerful advantage. For example, the combat range of an F-35 without any drop tanks on its wings is roughly 700 miles. This means an F-35 can take off, fly 700 miles towards its target, do its job, then return home, all on internal fuel. As I previously mentioned, the shortest distance to Iran from Israel is 620 miles. So if the F-35s were to carry out operations on internal fuel alone, they would not be able to penetrate very deep into Iran. So to extend the combat range of their air force, Israel had two options: external drop tanks and aerial refueling. There is plenty of evidence that Israel was using disposable fuel tanks, otherwise known as drop tanks, to extend the combat range of their jets. These external fuel tanks are used to extend the fighter jet's distance by about 40%. Once it's empty, the jet drops the tank to lighten the load and fly back home. But carrying these fuel tanks means the jet cannot carry more weapons, limiting the number of targets it can strike. Take a look at this F-16 without drop tanks, and now this F-16 with drop tanks. You can see how it limits the amount of weapons it can carry. Drop tanks can also affect the stealth of a jet like the F-35, which is designed with materials to prevent or reduce detection by air defense radar systems. So if the F-35 were to carry external drop tanks, the pylons that connect the fuel tanks to the fuselage of the jet would increase the radar cross-section to air defense systems. However, in 2019, Israel had requested that the US assist them with developing drop tanks for the F-35 that wouldn't wouldn't harm their stealth capabilities. And they seem to have had success because in an interview with Middle East Eye, an unnamed US official confirmed that Israel had successfully used external drop tanks for the F-35 during their attack on Iran without sacrificing stealth or requiring aerial refueling. In simple terms, air defense radars send out powerful pulses of electromagnetic waves. The waves hit an object and a portion of the energy is bounced back. The speed and amount of the bounce back will communicate the size, speed, and location of the flying object. To counter this, stealth aircraft are designed with materials that absorb the waves instead of bouncing them back. This is achieved by using special materials and shapes to reduce reflections and bounce them in the wrong direction. So the pylons that connect the external drop tanks would have to fit into the F-35 stealth design. Apparently, Israel and the US achieved this. Now, this is a big deal for reasons we will explore in just a bit. Now, while we haven't seen the F-35s with these new drop tanks, we have seen plenty of images released by the Israeli Air Force of the F-16 with 3 drop tanks attached. There were also several drop tanks discovered on the coast of Azerbaijan and inside Iraqi Kurdistan. This clearly indicates that Israeli jets flew over their airspace and then jettisoned their fuel tanks just before entering Iran's airspace. Now, the Israelis flying over Iraqi Kurdistan isn't a surprise as they lack air defenses to intercept Israeli planes. But flying over Azerbaijan, Iran's neighbor, is a serious issue and raises serious tension between the two countries. Azerbaijan denies this claim, but the evidence of drop tanks washing up on the shores of the Caspian Sea exposes the truth. So Iran has officially asked Azerbaijan to investigate the issue. Iran is threatening potentially severe consequences for their neighbor if it's confirmed that they allowed Israeli fighter jets to use their airspace to attack them. Now, just for reference, the combat radius of an F-16 with a typical combat load and drop tanks is around 340 miles. So there is no way an F-16 can make it to Iran and back with both the drop tanks and munitions attached. This is where aerial refuelers come in. Aerial refuelers extend the range of fighter jets by, well, refueling them mid-flight. We have video evidence of Israeli jets refueling over Syria's airspace, so we know that this took place. There's also a video captured by a Syrian farmer which shows 2 KC-130 aerial refuelers flying back towards Israel. However, Israel only has 7 Boeing 707 and 6 KC-130 aerial refuelers. Theoretically, these 13 planes could refuel up to 100 jets in a single operation, but only if nothing went wrong and not a second was wasted. This is very risky, so it's possible that the planes would only refuel about 40 to 60 jets in a single wave. This is why the innovation of the F-35 drop tank pylon that we discussed earlier was a big deal, because it lightened the load on the aerial refuelers, allowing for Israel to use more fighter jets in their attacks on Iran in a single wave. Israeli media outlet Ynet claimed that Israel had used all 13 of their aerial refuelers and carried out 700 sorties. Throughout the operation, Ra'im aircraft delivered millions of liters of fuel across more than 700 mid-air refueling hookups. The mission required ice-cold nerves and razor-sharp precision. At the height of the war with Iran, failure was not an option, especially for the fighter pilots relying on fuel mid-mission. So long story short, we know that to carry out their operations, the Israeli Air Force used external drop tanks and aerial refuelers to extend the range of their fighter jets. But how did these jets enter Iran's airspace and carry out the attacks? Well, there is evidence that Mossad agents carried out a number of attacks on air defenses with quadcopter drones and Stinger missiles that were assembled and launched from within the country. In this video here, you can see a captured Mossad agent admitting to Iranian officials that he would stand on the rooftops of homes and identify active air defense systems. This information would be relayed to the Mossad, who would give these coordinates to other agents to carry out drone attacks on these radar systems. Drones were then controlled remotely using internet data and SIM cards to carry out assassination attacks and target radar systems. For this reason, Iran cut the internet for a few days and urged citizens to report any suspicious activity. Vigilant citizens began carrying out their own arrests, leading officials to discover entire warehouses full of explosives and parts for the assembly assembly of drones and Stinger missiles to carry out these internal attacks. This is how and why so many assassinations and attacks were taking place inside the country, leading people to believe Israel's claims that their fighter jets were just flying over Iran uncontested. In reality, however, it was a large network of spies, planting car bombs, operating drones, identifying targets, and firing missiles. This produced what is known as suppression of enemy air defenses, or SEAD. This cleared the way for Israeli jets to then freely enter Iran's western airspace, where they could drop bombs and launch missiles. But not all of Israeli jets needed to penetrate deeply into Iran's airspace. Some didn't even need to penetrate at all, because Israel also used standoff missiles to carry out their strikes. There is evidence that Israel was launching missiles and bombs from just outside of Iranian airspace. You see, when Israel carried out an attack on Iran in October of 2024, they used air-launched ballistic missiles like the Sparrow and Golden Horizon. These are ballistic missiles that can be dropped from the air, then take off, rise into the atmosphere, and drop down at high speeds to hit their target.
Target identified. A critical mission. The challenge: to strike with precision without ever entering the enemy's reach. Meet Air Laura, a ballistic missile precision engineered for unmatched accuracy, capable of engaging strategic assets deep within hostile territory. Air Laura soars across vast distances, delivering fast response impact without engaging their defense systems or encroaching on enemy airspace. Striking from above at a 90-degree angle with supersonic speed, Air Laura penetrates air defenses shield. Carrying a warhead that delivers devastation guided by GPS and INS, immune to jamming, Air Laura ensures critical targets are neutralized with a single strike.
So it is likely that Israel was using these long-range missiles to avoid the risk of flying jets over Iran's airspace. These long-range missiles have the ability to penetrate deeply into Iran without the fighter jet coming anywhere near the target. This might be why there is zero video footage of Israeli jets flying over Iran, despite many attacks taking place during the day, with Iranians filming the skies with their phones. This suggests that the use of standoff missiles was a common tactic deployed by Israel during this war. In fact, a number of missile boosters belonging to the Golden Horizon were found on the ground in eastern Iraq. Now, the jets that did actually enter Iran's airspace possibly achieved this by accessing American systems of radar detection. Basically, Israeli jets may have had access to maps revealing gaps in Iran's air defenses. These gaps could be exploited as flight paths for the jets to fly through relatively undetected. Iran's air defenses were sophisticated, but there were clearly gaps that Israel could exploit. For example, it's also believed that Israel suppressed enemy air defenses in northwestern Iran, then flew over the high elevation areas using the mountains as cover so they could fly undetected into Azerbaijani airspace. There, they could loop around, fly over the Caspian Sea, fire standoff missiles into Iran, then fly back, refuel, and head home. So all of this is to say that Israel did destroy some of Iran's air defenses with Mossad operatives, drones, standoff missiles, and gaps in the air defense systems. This means Israeli jets were not flying over Iran's airspace at will as they have claimed, but still was able to demonstrate a form of air superiority as they were able to strike targets all over the skies of Iran without losing a single jet. That is impressive. So regardless of whether Iran's air defenses are actually still intact or not, Israel still achieved domination of the skies. Now let's talk about the missile launchers. Israel claimed it had destroyed 1/3 of Iran's missile launchers.
We destroyed over 50% of the missile launchers and damaged dozens of components.
But this is simply untrue. Open source intelligence has now confirmed that Israel only successfully destroyed 20 launchers, amounting to only a few % of Iran's total inventory. In fact, many of the launchers shown to be destroyed on video were either the same video from different angles or decoy launchers. Let's compare these two videos. The first one is of an actual launcher being destroyed, and this one is a decoy being destroyed. Do you see the difference in the explosion? So clearly, Israel didn't significantly suppress Iran's launching capabilities. This is why Iran was able to successfully retaliate in less than a day. So Israel did not destroy most, half, or even 1/3 of Iran's launchers. Iran, as a massive country, had mobile launchers in secure locations all over the country. What Israel did achieve, however, was the elimination of northwestern Iran as a launch site for their ballistic missiles. You see, Israel had two key objectives for this war: suppress air defenses so their air force could carry out attacks, and suppress launch sites to limit the scope of Iran's retaliation. They succeeded in the first goal, but failed in their second, as Iran was still capable of launching missiles at Israel. But because Israel had control of northwestern Irani airspace, Iran could not risk launching missiles closer to the border, so they needed to fire from further away in the center of the country. This meant Iran was forced to use newer missiles, which they have less of in their waves of retaliatory attacks on Israel, because the newer missiles have longer ranges. Israel's hope was that Iran would exhaust these missiles and then lose the ability to respond. But this didn't happen, as Iran continued to pummel Israel up until the final moment 12 days later. Finally, inaccurate missiles. Israel claimed Iran had inaccurate missiles that they were easily intercepting. Whatever got through, they claim, only hit civilian targets.
The difference between us and between the Iranian regime is we are attacking strategic military points in Iran to limit their military capabilities, while they are launching rockets at civilian buildings.
But this is 100% false. Immediately after Iran's first successful wave of strikes, Israel declared full censorship of any documentation of Iran's missiles, threatening to arrest anyone releasing video of the missile barrages. In this video, a German reporter shares how Israeli officials were preventing them from documenting any damage. She says they only allowed them to film if they were documenting civilian damage and not military targets.
Hi, I'm Sophie. I'm a correspondent for German TV ARD covering Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. And I want to talk a little bit about the challenges we're facing here as journalists at the moment. So, of course, there is a security concern, Iranian missile attacks. So whenever we go out and film, we think about where the closest shelter is. Then there are restrictions, military censorship. And according to these rules, we are only allowed to film and report if civilian targets were hit, residential buildings, for example. But if military or strategic targets were hit, we are not allowed to film and report unless we get the approval of the censor.
And in this video, a German reporter was interrupted mid-interview by an angry Israeli who didn't want her showing any missile damage to a sensitive location.
You know you cannot take the video of the location, right?
What?
You cannot take the video of the location, you know.
Who said it?
The army said it.
And who are you?
Who I am?
Yeah.
A citizen of Israel.
Yeah.
Who are you?
We are from German television.
Okay, you
reporters.
cannot take the location with.
You don't have to care about our work, and you don't need to film me.
Yeah, I need to film
You did not ask me. What are you doing?
No, you cannot take the video
Come
of
on,
the location.
guys. Don't disturb our work.
No, I will.
Would you please?
No.
Would you please?
No.
Should I call the police now?
Yes, call the police.
But this was not just limited to the media. Any civilian who documented the missile attacks was threatened with severe fines and even jail time. Israeli Security Minister Ben-Gvir announced that the police would hunt down anyone filming Iran's missile attacks. Ben-Gvir said, "Broadcasts that show exactly where the missiles land on the state of Israel are a danger to the security of the state, and I expect that anyone who does this will be treated as someone who harms the security of the state." Israel engaged in the censorship for 3 reasons: to hide the damage Israel was taking, to shape the damage as civilian, and 3, to prevent Iran from gathering data on the success of their strikes. You see, Iran does not have the precision capabilities that Israel has, with all of its satellites, reconnaissance, planes, drones, fighter jets, and access to American intelligence and guidance systems. If Israel wanted, they could hit a cockroach in Iran. On the other hand, Iran has to rely on its own guidance and is limited in their ability to confirm the accuracy of their strikes. Mobile phone footage could confirm for them whether or not they actually hit their targets, and Iran needs this data in order to determine whether or not they need to improve the guidance systems for their missiles. But despite the censorship, footage poured out of Israel anyway, showcasing Iran's successful strikes on a number of military targets. For example, Iran took out the Weizmann Institute, a center that supports the Israeli army with AI, drone guidance, advanced weapons, cyber defense, and nuclear tech. The Weizmann Institute works very closely with Elbit Systems to develop bio-inspired military materials and maintains its ties with defense firms like Israel's aerospace industries. The Weizmann Institute suffered 2 direct hits during the war with Iran. No lives were lost, but the damage to buildings and research is estimated in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And the Telegraph reported that at least 5 secret and strategic Israeli bases were targeted and destroyed by Iran's missiles. This is also seemingly confirmed by Israeli media.
כי צריך לומר שיש קצת היבט איראני בדרך בה אנחנו סקרים את הפגיעות שהיו בנו, לא במכון ויצמן, אבל היו הרבה מאוד פגיעות בבסיסי צה"ל, באתרים אסטרטגיים שאנחנו לא מדווחים עליהם עד היום. ויש לזה סיבה ברורה שכל אחד בבית מבין, אבל בצד הסיבה הברורה הזאת נוצר מצב שאנשים לא מבינים כמה האיראנים דייקו וכמה הם גרמו נזק בהרבה מאוד מקומות. מכון ויצמן אנחנו פשוט יודעים, יש מקומות רבים שאנחנו לא יודעים.
And in this viral clip here, we see Iranian missiles striking the Gilot military intelligence base for Unit 8200 intelligence centers near Tel Aviv. So it's clear that Iran's lightning-fast missiles were able to penetrate Israeli air defenses and strike strategic military targets. In short, Iran's missiles were not inaccurate, and they were successfully targeting military bases and strategic locations. Okay, now it's time to address Iran's propaganda. Now this video is long enough, so in part 2 of this series, which is available right now, I will explore Iran's propaganda claims. Click here to watch it.